What's up, everybody? Today we're going to talk about the G8 or the G7 and the G20. As you can see from this picture on this opening slide, there are 8 flags. Which flags are these? Well, we have the United Kingdom, Russia, Canada, France, United States, Italy, Japan, and Germany. So, what do these 8 countries have to do with one another? Let's take a look. So, what is the G8? This is another one of the intergovernmental organizations or political forums with participation from the world's major highly industrialized economies. So, in countries that viewed themselves as democracies. Essentially, it's 8 countries that are hot. So, they have big economies, they're powerful, and it's a forum. So they get together with each other. This is different from something like the World Bank or the IMF. It's not actually an organization, it's just a group that gets together. Now, the reason I said G8 and G7 is because in 2014, Russia's membership was suspended. This was due to their annexation of Crimea, which was a part of the Ukraine. After this happened, the G8 said, "Well, you can't be in our group if you're invading other countries." So they kicked them out. So essentially, what they do is they meet. I don't know, maybe once a year, twice a year. They discuss things about like economic policies, global concerns, energy, and recently there's been a focus on world food supply. So again, going back to that post-World War world, countries are working together instead of fighting each other. There's cooperation, at least to some extent, because they believe that if we work together, our economies are going to improve. And if we have economic stability, well, politically, we're going to be more stable as well. Now, the G8, it also, though, has some criticisms. For example, what about China? Lots of critics argue that the G8 or G7 is no longer relevant, as the countries that are a part of it are no longer representative of the most industrialized in the world. China has surpassed every single country in the G8 except for the United States. So, how do you have a group of powerful countries in the world when you're excluding the second largest economy in the world? And it should be noted that the difference between second and third is extreme. China is way bigger than Japan, the third largest economy in the world. So these things are important to take into consideration. Others also argue that the G8 represents a minority rule in global affairs. So these critics would say, why should these 7 or 8 world leaders be able to have so much influence over the planet when it's only 7 of them? Yet, these 8 countries make up about half of the global gross domestic product. So you might argue, should they have their own group? And so here we look at countries that belong to the G7. And we can see, well, what's missing here? Most of the world, including those big powerhouses like China, India, Brazil. So this brings us to the G20. So the G7 and the G20 both exist. The G20, though, is different. This is 19 countries plus the entire European Union. So it's another political forum with all these countries, and it represents 85% of the world's gross domestic or the world's gross product, 80% of world trade, 2/3 of the world population, and half of the world land area. So this is a more inclusive forum. And when you look at the actual membership, it's a much larger proportion of the world's economy being represented. There's still a lot of critics. They don't like the closed door nature of the organization or the fact that there is no actual official charter. So there is no document saying this is what we do, these are our goals, this is our mandate. Things are flexible and they change. Another thing that people don't like a lot of the times is that the cost of meetings can be very high. All you have to do is think about if you have 20 or well more than that, it's about 37 of the, because of the European Union, if you have 37 of the world's like political leaders meeting together, you're going to need to make sure that you're providing security. And so the cost of meetings can be extremely high. This has led to many protests at the meetings. Now, you can watch these videos on your own. The G20 meeting in Toronto there was a huge protest and riot that followed it. Similar things have happened in Germany and other countries. Essentially, there's a lot of critics. This isn't a perfect world setup, but the fact that more countries have been included in the G20, including those quickly developing countries such as India, Brazil, South Africa. Some people think, well, now it's more inclusive. But what's the next step from here? For critics, the question could be, well, how should economic policies be discussed and determined? Who should get to determine policies? These questions have a lot of different answers, right? If you're the sort that you believe economic power should dictate political power, then you might say, well, the most wealthy countries in the world should have the most say. However, some people might say that's unethical, as you're leaving a lot of countries out of this decision-making process, and the decisions affect them as well. So the G7 or the G20, they're political forums. They get together and they try to discuss world issues. And it's a smaller scale than something like the United Nations, which is almost all countries in the world. Anyway, that's the G8 and the G20, a very brief explanation of them. But again, this is demonstrating that worldwide cooperation, multilateral thinking, countries working together instead of just working alone on the world stage. Thanks for listening.